Welcome back. It is a Monday, which means it's time for our weekly feature, The Political View. And the fragmented labour movement is in the spotlight this week. The Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU, sitting for its 13th National Congress. More than 2,000 delegates convening in Midrand for the four-day event that ends on Thursday. The alliance partner of the ANC, of course, has been bleeding members. NUMSA, which was once COSATU's biggest union affiliate, was expelled in 2016, now under the banner of the South African Federation of Trade Unions, SAFTU. The Food and Allied Workers Union, other splinter groups have followed suit. An organizational report shows that the membership of COSATU unions fell to 1.6 million this year. Now, to put that in context, it's down from 2.2 million in 2013. To discuss this and other political developments, we're joined by political reporter for Eyewitness News, Clement Manyathela. Great to have you with us,
Thank
Clement.
you. Thank you for having me.
So does COSATU go into this 13th Congress very weak or showing signs of turning a corner?
I mean, when you listen to the leaders of COSATU, they'll tell you of how confident they are, how the federation is united, it's still strong. But when you look at the numbers and you look at the challenges that the federation has been facing, it's quite bleak. I mean, you're mentioning the numbers there. They're sitting at about 1.6 million. Unions like, SATAU have lost over 50% of their members over the last few years. So the numbers are definitely not looking well. But also you're dealing with a federation here that is trying to be relevant, to remain relevant. I mean, SAFTU has entered the fray. A lot of people are asking, where is COSATU? There's a VAT increase. Is it still that militant COSATU that government and the ANC will listen to? Even
the minimum wage, SAFTU was very strong. COSATU, it said, was in bed with government supporting the low wage, minimum wage. Did that make it vulnerable?
Look, I mean, COSATU always says we are very confident that we were able to be at the forefront of the fight to get the minimum wage. They're saying they're not necessarily happy with the actual amount of money that will be paid to the workers, but it's a start. And SAFTU has been saying that's not where we should start. And that's why some critics are saying COSATU is starting a lot to flirt a lot with the ANC like it has in the past, and it's not remaining militant and standing their position. But also, if you look at some of the campaigns that they've been spearheading, what happened to the fight against e-tolls, issues like that, they haven't really been successfully been able to get the ANC, to make certain policy changes as well. And that's why people are criticizing it and saying it's a weak organization that is in bed with the ANC.
So a fight for relevance, a fight for numbers. There were reports that NUMSA, who fled to SAFTU, could come back. Do you think that's a possibility?
I don't see that happening. President Cyril Ramaphosa today addressing the delegates said we need to get to a position where we welcome and we bring back some of the organizations that have left. But that's not going to be easy. That's similar conversation to saying let's bring back the EFF, for example. These people have established themselves in other organizations like SAFTU. There's already a united front movement that has been sort of established within that movement. So I don't see that being a possibility at this stage.
So President Cyril Ramaphosa, as ANC president, talking about one labour federation, one movement. Again, it's a pipe dream.
It is. When you listen to some of the leaders of SAFTU, they always talk about how they don't want to be affiliated to any political party. COSATU is affiliated to the ANC, and when the president speaks about one union, one party, at some point that union has to be affiliated to the political party. That's going to be very complicated for organizations like SAFTU, which has made it very clear that they want to operate independently. They don't want to be accused of being in bed with a particular political party and being unable to influence policies in that party that they may be in alliance with.
So will that be up for discussion, the current alliance, and whether COSATU should even remain?
That's one of the big, talking points. I was going through the discussion document, the political report, and it identifies exactly that. Unions like NAHAU are starting to suggest that perhaps we need to start thinking about the idea of, throwing our weight behind the SACP. Remember, the SACP has taken a decision to contest elections. Some people are saying, should we continue supporting the ANC or should we simply throw our weight behind the SACP? And that will be determined by how the discussions around the reconfiguration of the alliance go. COSATU and the SACP want the entire alliance to be a strategic center of power and not necessarily the ANC, which is a leader and takes unilateral decisions on deployments, on policy matters. They want to be involved in those key decision making.
And of course we will emerge with a new COSATU leadership. So people talking about Zingiswa Losi, a possible first female president. Is she a contender?
When you look at the numbers, I mean, she has the numbers. COSATU's biggest union, Nehau, has nominated her to be the next president of COSATU. The question is Dumo Dlamini going to accept nomination, or is he even going to be nominated? As he was making his address today, he said he would have loved to meet with the Minister of Energy, Jeff Radebe, and then he said, I'm leaving, so he will meet with whoever is coming next. To me, it felt like he was suggesting that he won't be standing for the position of president. Yeah. Perhaps he knows that the numbers are not in his favor, but we'll wait and see sometime this week.
For a while, he's been on the fence.
Yeah.
Well, let's sort of end this section with that. How would you assess his leadership, Dumo Dlamini, remembering that he has often been out of step with COSATU itself, with other leaders in his support of former President Jacob Zuma?
This is the man that has always maintained his loyalty to the former President Jacob Zuma. He's made it very clear recently that he doesn't think that the former president will be involved in any plot to unseat a sitting president of the ANC. That's a sentiment that's very different from some of the leaders of COSATU, like Bekin Chalinchali, the General Secretary, and some of the leaders of COSATU. So he's a man that's been disagreeing a lot with the leadership of COSATU. He's gone to former President Jacob Zuma's birthday party and said, as COSATU, we support you. Immediately after COSATU leaders had decided that we want Jacob Zuma to step down. So there have been a lot of disagreements because they were possibly, supporting different factions in the ANC. And I think and I suspect that the leadership that will emerge out of this 13th National Congress will be one that sort of backs, a specific, the current leadership of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, in the next few years.
All right, let's move to the Zondo Commission on state capture. Scintillating testimony today, and let's hear it. The Standard Bank's Ian Sinton, and we're going to show you a clip now where he describes a meeting between Standard Bank and government ministers about shutting down bank accounts linked to the controversial Gupta family.
When we arrived at the meeting, there were 3 people attending the meeting on behalf of the IMC. There was Minister Zwane, Minister Olifant, and Mr. Jimmy Manye.
Was Mr. Jimmy Manye a minister at the time?
No, we asked on what basis he was attending, and he told us that he was an advisor to the ministers.
Did he remain in attendance throughout the meeting?
Yes, he did.
All right, so he's mentioning Jimmy Manye, who prefers to be called Mzwanele Manye, former head of ANN7, Afro View, formerly linked to government. But big questions why he was in that meeting.
Of course, and I mean, he was identified as an advisor to the ministers. And for me, interestingly, this is the second time that Mzwanele Manye's name is being mentioned at the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. Remember, Phumla Williams also spoke a lot about her, about him, Themba Maseko as well. And really, that is the big question. And I suppose we have to wait and see if some of the people that have been implicated will avail themselves to put their version of events so that it can be tested. I'm also interested to see if the cabinet ministers, even some of the ANC leaders like Gwede Mantashe, the then Secretary General, and Jesse Duarte, if they will avail themselves to come and speak about that meeting, where they had summoned Standard Bank CEO at the time, Sim Chabalala, to come and explain this idea of closing the accounts of the Gupta family. The ANC has consistently said, we are not on trial at the State Capture Commission, but they've been implicated now, and they've been calling on people to come through, and I think it's time perhaps for them to also come and put their version of events and let it be tested by the Commission.
So Ferial Haffajee on social media today saying Standard Bank was roughed up. Other people talking about Standard Bank being strong-armed. I asked our own reporter earlier, do you agree with that? There was huge pressure put here.
No, it's very clear, according to Sinton, that there was pressure, not only from the cabinet ministers, that interministerial committee led by Msebenzi Zwane, but even by the African National Congress through one of their most senior leaders, the Secretary General of the ANC. And I mean, if you listen to that testimony, it talks about how they were accused of operating with white monopoly capital. They were accused of receiving instructions from Stellenbosch, so that for me sounds like political pressure.
And vague threats and kind of undue pressure perhaps. Minister Zwane, I think we should remember at the time he was the mining minister.
Yeah.
And this perhaps points to economic mismanagement. There were huge problems in the mining sector, but he was championing this cause. He seemed to devote a lot of time to dealing with the Gupta bank account.
And I think it's not surprising given the kind of relationship that he had with the family, given the kind of defense, how he has previously, passionately defended the family. It's quite, I think, understandable that he would go even when it's not necessarily a department that involves him. He would go out and defend the Gupta family, and I think it was just that contact that the Gupta family had created amongst the cabinet ministers, people like Faith Mutambi, and those are the people that were defending it. That they were willing to go to any length to really defend the Gupta family and make sure that this alleged state capture essentially thrives.
All right, let's move to the another alleged the coup plot. And ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule now reportedly today was going to respond to the National Working Committee of the ANC. Is he in real trouble here for that secret meeting or seemingly secret meeting?
I think we got a taste of how President Cyril Ramaphosa feels about this issue and how this entire issue could be discussed in the NWC as it sits currently as we speak. The
At
president,
the COSATU Congress.
The president, addressing the COSATU Congress, he spoke very passionately. I've never seen him speak passionately like that and addressing what has been reported in the papers. He really, addressed this issue of this alleged plot, and he says, if there are people who are plotting something, it has to be a plot to unite the ANC and to fight poverty. It shouldn't be, people must not be sitting in dark corners, trying to divide the organization. And he was essentially sending a strong message to ANC members to beware of some leaders that are trying to divide this organization. The question is, was he indirectly referring to former President Jacob Zuma? But this is in the context of that Sunday Times report. So,
well, what do you think? Because then he would be suggesting it was an ominous meeting.
I think it was quite clear that he was directly responding to that meeting. He speaks about a plot. He speaks about, dark corners, secret dealings. Those are, the languages that are being used in that Sunday Times report. The former the Secretary General Ace Magashule has already admitted to having met the former president of the ANC, Jacob Zuma. So I think in that NWC meeting, I've spoken to a number of those members and they're saying we need some answers. He has to tell us what the meeting was about. Why didn't he tell the officials about it before it happened? Because it was to discuss organizational issues. So I think he's got some answering to do tonight.
And at the very least, the NWC, the Working Committee, seems to be changing, or the ANC itself, because Zizi Kodwa last week was saying, nobody has to account for any meeting if it's not party business. They're taking it seriously now. I
think, and that tells us about the divisions on how different leaders of the ANC are approaching this issue. Pule Mabe released a statement and saying, no, those are blatant lies, irresponsible reporting. And then Zizi Kodwa comes the next day and says, hold on, we can't just deny. Jackson Mthembu came and said, NEC needs to take an urgent decision to deal with this issue. And now seeing members of the NWC saying we have to speak about this issue, for me, it tells me that they take it very seriously. Listening to President Cyril Ramaphosa directly address it today at the COSATU Congress, to me, says that it's quite serious. But the question is, what's going to happen next? They may take it seriously. Ace Magashule may answer in that NWC meeting tonight, but what happens next? Are there going to be sanctions? Are they going to warn him? What is going to be happening next? Because
this exposes those fault lines again. We've had this talk of unity, but now we're seeing those different factions come to the fore again. Remembering Stumo Dlamini, I think, defended that so-called secret meeting.
Yeah, so the unity of the ANC, the leaders of the ANC will tell you about how united the organization is, that the Nasrec, the slate, that was elected in Nasrec was a united slate. But I mean, when you look at on the ground, you look at people like former Northwest Premier Supra Mahomapelo, there's people that are not necessarily happy with this leadership because they claim that some people in the leadership are going after them because they supported a different candidate at that Nasrec conference. But also, we see President Cyril Ramaphosa speaking a lot about unity and the need to go into the elections very much united. I think he realizes that the ANC is not necessarily united. There are still people, possibly like the former president, possibly like people that have been that have seen action being taken against them, like former Premier of the Northwest, Supra Mahumapelo, who would want to revenge and want to fight back. And COSATU has already confirmed that it knows that there is a serious fight back, and there are people who want to undermine the current leadership of the ANC. And the question is the president of the ANC really going to manage to unite this organization? Because it can't really afford to be divided going into elections.
Well, was there a different tone in his speech at the Congress today? He's mentioned state capture before, but I don't know if you heard him talking about economic mismanagement for decades, bringing South Africa to the place where we are right now, which seems to be firmly placing the blame on the previous administration or the previous leader, because he was part of that administration.
Yes, and for me, the first time he sort of made that suggestion was when we spoke to him in China, and he said, what you're seeing with the technical recession, with the economy not performing well, is all transitional. It has everything to do with what's happened and we have taken over. It's very much transitional. So he was making a suggestion that he has come in to essentially fix the mess that has been the previous administration, but he was also part of that administration.
Well, the question is, where was he? Because he was head of state business for possibly those decades of economic mismanagement that he's talking about now.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good question. Where was he? Because he has to take some level of responsibility, I imagine. But he seems to now say, my hands are not tied. I'm in a position of power. I'm in a position of influence. I can, instruct or even have discussions with my cabinet members to say, let's come up with these ideas. Let's come up with the stimulus package. Let's have investor envoys like he has. Let's go to different countries and really come back with dollars. He set an investment target of $100 billion, and he says he's already seeing some successes and some progress in that. So he seems to believe that now that he's president, he's able to take action, but not only that, to also come up with ideas to try and rejuvenate the economy and start shaking it up again so that it can start growing.
And finally, I mean, there was speculation that he had to talk about unity, he had to compromise with former political enemies, but secretly he might be hoping that Ace Magashule, Didi Mabuza may scupper themselves, may get themselves into trouble, and he won't be the one censuring them. It'll be the ANC or the law enforcers, actually.
I mean, there's when you look at the law enforcement agencies, they are after some really senior leaders of the ANC, and sometimes the president of the ANC doesn't necessarily have to, take action, and be out in public and say, you were wrong to do this, I'm going to take action against you. Sometimes he's allowing all these legal processes to unfold. There are senior leaders of the ANC that are the subject of the Hawks investigations, for example. Ace Magashule can be involved in the Estina Dairy project, and he still needs to answer for that. So in some instances, legal processes, law enforcement agencies are just going to, deal with some of these people that have been implicated in wrongdoing without the president of the ANC being the one that comes out directly and says, I'm coming after you and I'm coming after you.
All right, well, illuminating analysis. Thank you for joining us tonight. That was Clement Manyathela, a political reporter from Eyewitness News, and that was our weekly feature, The Political View. And remember, if you'd like to view this interview, you can go to sabcnews.com. We take a short break.